Everyone, welcome to another episode of Navigating Growth, where we showcase companies that are doing new and unique things. My name is Sal Imami from Better Call Sal, and co-hosting with me is Kevin Hooper from Hanging with Mr. Hooper. As our lives continue to move more and more to the internet, so does the concern with security. Hackers are everywhere and looking for any way to enter into your digital life and cause all sorts of havoc. This happens to individuals and companies every day. For example, you guys may be aware of the Target breach or Blue Cross Blue Shield or even the IRS. Most of these hacks were done due to lacks of security, especially when it comes to individual credentials. We're all used to entering our login ID and our password. However, that is no longer enough. As you guys are well aware, people put their user ID and password on Post-it notes and put it in front of their monitor. So that's just not enough security. So we can use other methodologies to secure our credentials, but at the cost of annoyance to the individual user. Today's guest is approaching this concern from a different perspective. His solution is providing ease of use with a unique security methodology and operating in a zero trust environment. To tell us more, I'd like to introduce Gary Struder, the co-founder of Invysta. Gary, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sal. Glad to be here.
So let's start off by telling us, what is Invysta?
Invysta is a method of ensuring that the access to your protected accounts is made from devices that you know and have registered for access to that account. Your endpoint devices like smartphones, tablets, and computers.
So Gary, this is clearly a problem that everyone is dealing with, everything from companies down to individual users. I know yesterday I had an issue with one of my streaming services, password, and I've got upwards of 12 different devices that I had to go through and change the password on. How did you come up with this idea, given your history in the industry, given everything? What was the aha moment that caused you to say, I'm going to build a company?
We started thinking about this back in 2011. My co-founder, Pat Price, and I had experience in the technology field, and especially with encryption. And we were implementing encryption for backups on Windows-type devices and what have you. At that point in time, you were starting to hear more and more about breaches of secure websites and accounts and what have you. And I was sitting there one day and I was just kind of looking at this phones and that, and I thought, God, you know what? I've been in that side of the business. I know there's uniqueness to each one of these things. So I got with Pat and we said, okay, let's go out and investigate this and see if in fact that uniqueness does exist. And so we went out and we did a lot of research and we said, you know what, there are unique components and elements within each of those smart devices which can be used to build an identifier that reflects that device and that device only. And the term that we've used that people seem to get is it's kind of like the DNA of that device. We decided that the route to go was to begin to file patents on that. So once we started getting the patents issued, we said, okay, now it's time to figure out how we're going to implement this across all the endpoint devices that people are using to address their accounts, smartphones, tablets, and computers.
Take us through from that point to today. You're talking to us and you have products that are out there in market. Take us through that growth story, if you could.
We really didn't do much on the implementation front until we started getting the patents issued. And that was 2016, 2017. And we started with the Windows platform, okay? And we have progressively since then worked our way through where we now are in the Apple Store, our client agent, and we're also in the Android Store and the Windows Store. So we covered all the endpoint devices that were out there. We just couldn't see going to market with only a portion of those devices being protected. It would be an incomplete solution and probably no better than what they have today. So we knew that we had to bring this up to the point where we could cover all the devices that people use to address their accounts. We wanted people that were really interested in what we were doing. And we've got about 25 people that are actively participating in this, and they're all shareholders in the company. These people are very enthusiastic about what we're doing.
So what type of partnerships have you engaged with And what has worked with those partners and what hasn't?
We've been actively talking with a couple of companies that I think we fit nicely into what they're doing, and they've got these high-speed pipelines that are very, very, very secure. That's all great, except that if anybody can get in, the pipeline doesn't mean anything. We continue to work with them to build this out where this is a complementary product to what they're doing. And then we've also been doing a lot in the small and medium business market. We can get in front of these MSPs and say, hey, here's a tool that you can bring to your customer, and that customer can benefit from this. And, it's not something that's going to create a huge burden for you from a support standpoint.
If hindsight was 2020, if you had a time machine, you could go back in time to advise yourself back in the sort of 2016, 2017 world, what advice would you give? What would you do differently or better based on the experience that you now have in doing this?
I think that the thing that I would do something a bit different on is the funding of the company. We've never taken any outside money. We have funded this ourselves from the beginning. And while that's good in a lot of ways, it's also forced us to operate in a more serial fashion than a parallel fashion. For instance, we did the Windows client agent in that side. And then we went and did the Android. Then we went and did the Apple, because we didn't have the resources to do all those at the same time. So I think I would have done a better job of articulating what it is that we're doing, and went out and looked for money a little sooner than we have today. There's a lot of benefits to it. We don't owe anybody anything, and I had experience a long time ago with a guy named Don Valentine who started Sequoia, and I knew him fairly well, and he was on our board, and he told me a couple times, he said, Gary, if you take people's money, you got to take their advice. Maybe I took that a little too much to heart, but that's the major thing that I think we would change.
Thank you for taking on this mission to change the experience that people have with respect to identity management and the identity experience as both a user and as a company, because as you clearly articulated, this is one of the big things that IT departments are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Just in summary of what I've heard here, one, it's identify what your market is and be exhaustive in being able to serve the whole market, to go and bring that technology to enterprises and end users. Secondly, the notion of the partnerships, of which I identified 3 from your conversation. One is that's how you've built your human capital, is by partnering with people and having them take an ownership stake. The notion of ownership is incredibly powerful from a motivating standpoint. The second thing is building alliances with technology providers that are going to use your technology. And then lastly, and I think this is the one that we find many startups, especially pre-revenue startups, don't necessarily take into account, and you clearly have, which is this notion of identifying a channel to get to your customers through the MSPs. I think that's incredibly important. In asking you what you would have done differently, it's very interesting. The people that have taken a lot of funding to get to where they are disappointed with how little ownership they have of their own intellectual capital, because that is really what you're giving away when you take that funding. And yet your articulation of what you could have done differently or better had you taken a little bit of funding, which is to not be so serial and not to be so waterfall in the development of your technology, I think is profound, because there's balance. There should be balance in the concept of how you build out a company in terms of taking funding. So thank you very much. Sal and Marmy from Better Call Sal, thank you as always. And from everyone who is watching at home, thanks, and we'll see you next time.